Sondra Perl is a professor of English at Herbert H. Lehman College of the City University of New York. She's been teaching for over 40 years and has published several books throughout her career. She's won multiple awards, including the Exemplar Award from the Conference on College Composition and Communication. She's also done multiple talks in regards to the Holocaust, keeping the discussion about the subject and its tragedies alive. Now that we know who Sondra Perl is, let's switch gears and hone in on her 1979 article titled "The Composing Process of Unskilled College Writers." We can get an idea of what all researchers knew about the writing process directly from Perl's article, where she mentioned several sources that delve into the writing processes of unskilled writers. These articles were all smaller in scale and didn't really have much of an impact in regards to writing process knowledge, though. Since almost no articles answered key questions about the writing process, she decided to take it into her own hands and write an article herself. In this article, Perl listed 3 questions that she attempted to answer through her research. These questions include: how do unskilled writers write? Can the writing processes be analyzed in a systematic, replicable manner? And what does an increased understanding of their processes suggest about the nature of composing in general and the manner in which writing is taught in the schools? Finding the answers to these questions would be key to finding out new ways writing could be taught. Let's move on to the methods. In the fall semester of 1975 to 1976, 5 students were selected based on their unskilled writing abilities, including a student named Tony. Remember that name. Each student went through 5 90-minute sessions in which the researcher would study their behavior. In the first 2, the students were expected to write about society and culture. The first section was dedicated toward an extensive writing process, which is writing mainly focused on publishing, and the second section was dedicated toward a reflexive writing process, which is associated with writing for yourself. In these first 2 sections, the only directions they were given was to compose out loud. In the third section, students were interviewed by the researcher, which was meant to get a profile of each student's assumptions about writing. The last 2 were like the first section, but the students wrote about capitalism and were additionally told to talk about their ideas before writing. As one can tell, this is a rather unconventional approach to researching. But through this unconventional approach, Perl was able to reach some important findings. The results of the study focus on the student named Tony, the one I mentioned previously. Tony was a 20-year-old ex-Marine that was born in the United States as a Puerto Rican. Before writing, Tony would take the prompt and reword the question until it related to something he had experience in. This way he could provide some meaningful information to the paper. When writing, Perl observed that Tony would go back and reread sentences or sections that he just wrote, making sure that everything flowed nicely. This process happened almost regularly and was very cyclical in nature. Talk, write, reread, plan, then write again. These steps happened over and over through Tony's writing. When writing extensively, Tony would go through this cycle more often than when writing reflexively, likely because extensive writing is expected to be more professional. Tony also edited his paper a lot, Perl saying that it actually inhibited the development of ideas. This likely wouldn't have been much of an issue if Tony were using a word processing application on a computer, but since this was in the 1970s, Tony had to use a typewriter. Once Tony was finished, there were still a lot of unresolved errors, 89 to be precise. As Perl said though, that doesn't make Tony a bad writer. Perl then goes on to explain that Tony, like many other unskilled writers, have a clear and systematic approach to the writing process, whether learned in school or on their own. In the discussion portion of the article, Perl highlights the hindrances in the writing process of the subjects, likely hindrances that we, as newer academic writers, experience ourselves. Tony and all the other subjects focused heavily on grammar rules and editing, sometimes confusing themselves as to whether or not to add or remove something. In doing this, it takes their train of thought away from what they're actually writing, which can result in clunky and confusing writing. To prevent this from happening, try to focus on getting all your writing down first, then focus on grammar and editing afterwards. The subjects also had a hard time trying to write for the audience. Multiple times they would reference things that the audience may not be entirely aware of without providing additional context. If we want to be better writers, we need to think about the examples or experiences we provide and give them context so the reader can understand what's trying to be said. The subjects would also read words or phrases aloud but not actually write them down on paper. This can make certain sections of your paper confusing to read as it doesn't show your full thought process. So, when writing, be sure to write down exactly what you're thinking, then see if it makes sense. After this research, Perl went on to publish several books and articles that took these findings and articulated them. She's written books such as Felt Sense, Writing with the Body, Through Teachers' Eyes, Portraits of Writing Teachers at Work, landmark essays on writing process, and more. Notice how all of these book titles relate to her research in some way. Not only has she written books though, she's written her very own guidelines for writing. These guidelines consist of steps one should go through in order to write effectively, like find a way to get comfortable and ask yourself if there's anything in the way of your writing. Essentially, she's been finding ways to help both teachers and students get a better understanding of what a good writing process is.